Welcome to today's webinar, which is hosted by Engage, the National Resource Center for Engaging Older Adults, which is administered by US Aging. My name is Meredith Hanley. I serve as the Director of Community Capacity Building at US Aging and oversee the Engaged Resource Center. Our webinar today is called Intergenerational Programs, Potpourri, Tips and Strategies to Develop Engagement Opportunities Between Generations. And you can go to the next slide. During the webinar, Generations United will provide a framer on intergenerational programs, including types of programs, current trends, and tips for local organizations developing intergenerational programs. Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens, DOROT, and the University of Colorado Anschutz Multidisciplinary Center on Aging will then highlight intergenerational programs offered by their organizations and discuss how other organizations can create and implement similar offerings. Next slide. We have a few housekeeping items. All attendees of this webinar are in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. So that means your microphone or your phone will be muted, but there are still ways you can engage with our speakers today. You can submit questions for the presenters at any time during this presentation by clicking the Zoom Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. In fact, we encourage you to submit questions at any time versus waiting to the end. It helps us to organize the Q&A session. You just type your question into the Q&A box and then hit submit. And we do plan to save around 10 minutes or so for questions near the end. There's also the chat feature. So you can engage that way, and you can also click on the chat button to submit a message to us as the host if you need technical support, and we'll do our best to help you. And the webinar is being recorded, and we'll share a link with you in the next few days. Next slide. For those who are using a screen reader and perhaps want to silence unwanted chatter in the chat and Q&A boxes, you can activate the speech on demand feature by pressing Insert, Spacebar, and S on the keyboard. You can also view closed caption subtitles, watch a live transcript, or adjust the size of the subtitle text. To control the closed captions, you click on the CC Live Transcript button in the control bar at the bottom of the Zoom window. And if you'd like to notify us that you need technical assistance, you can also raise or lower your hand. And you can also do that pressing Alt+Y on your keyboard as well. Next slide. So before we move into speakers, I have just a little bit of information on Engage, the National Resource Center for Engaging Older Adults, in case you're not familiar with our work or haven't attended one of these monthly webinars before. But Engaged is a national effort. We've been in place since 2017, funded by the Administration for Community Living, and we work to increase the social engagement of older adults, people with disabilities, and caregivers. We focus on identifying, developing, and disseminating resources, best and promising practices, and we also host learning opportunities such as this webinar for the Aging Network and Aging Network partner organizations. Engaged is administered by US Aging, but we're also guided by a project advisory committee with representatives from 18 organizations and resource centers that help to guide and shape our work. Next slide. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers for today's webinar. We're joined by Sherry Steinig, Special Projects Director with Generations United, Lynna Mitchell, Grant Writer with the Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens, Cindy Smith, a Certified Occupational Therapy Assistant with Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens, Shai Rosenfield, Lead Educator for DOROT, and Jody Waterhouse, the Director of Outreach Programs for the University of Colorado Anschutz Multidisciplinary Center on Aging. So with that, Sherry, I will pass it back to you.
Thank you, Meredith. I'm really happy to have a chance to share a bit about intergenerational programs, their benefits, and some current trends. For those who don't know us, Generations United is a national organization that strengthens practices and policies to benefit all generations. We've been around for over 35 years and focus on promoting intergenerational programs and supporting grand families and kinship families. Next slide, please. I wanted to start today by sharing this definition. So intergenerational engagement, intergenerational programs bring people of different ages together in purposeful and mutually beneficial activities that promote greater understanding and respect between the generation. It builds on the positive resources younger and older people have to offer each other and to their communities. Typically, younger people are defined as infants through a traditional college-age students, and older people often defined as the 50 plus, 60, 65 plus, depending on the program. Recently, we've seen more programs, including those who may fall in the middle: parents, caregivers, adult children, staff, and volunteers, and really recognizing the value of engaging all generations in this work. The next slide. One of the reasons that we use the term intergenerational is that we feel that it implies a greater level of connection, that multiple generations are communicating, working together, connecting for a purpose, and it focuses on the intentional interactions between the generations. While multi-generational more implies that multiple ages are on a site or involved in a program or activity, but they're not necessarily engaged with each other or intentionally brought together. The programs that make the most impact are those that are intentionally designed to build those connections and relationships between the generations. On the next slide, I wanted to share two images from Dr. Matt Kaplan at Penn State University that illustrates this distinction. The first one shows a park designed as an intergenerational space. You can see that there are elements for both younger and older people, as well as elements that bring the generations together. There's an activity shelter, a games table, a story table. And if you look at the sandbox, you'll see that there's a spot for an adult to sit and then a spot for a child to sit in the sandbox. On the next slide, you'll see a more traditional multi-generational park setting that has elements for both ages, but really no intentional design that would encourage interaction or bringing the generations together. On the next slide, there are many benefits of intergenerational programs for participants of all ages, for staff, for organizations and communities. Last year, we released 2 documents that go in depth about the different benefits of intergenerational programs for all of these different groups based on a very comprehensive review of literature. And after my presentation, I'll share those resources in the chat with all of you. On the next slide. But a few years ago, we did a report where we were asking what were the perceived benefits for older adults and youth in these intergenerational programs. The top 5 of these benefits are listed here. The most frequently reported for youth was a greater understanding of issues faced by older adults. The most frequently reported for older adults was decreased in isolation and increase in connectedness. But interestingly, respondents reported that the other perceived benefits really in equal proportions for older adults and youth: increased self-esteem, feelings of worth, increased trust across the ages, and increased sense of community. Next slide. So intergenerational programs are many things, and we often talk about an intergenerational lens when we're looking at your work in your communities. These are just some of the different domains of intergenerational programs, and the types of intergenerational programs and activities really vary widely within this group. The next slide. We did want to give you some tools for finding different examples of intergenerational program. You'll hear more about some terrific programs today, but I did want to direct you to a couple places where you can find some examples. First, the Engaged Innovations Hub has a number of intergenerational social engagement programs. And then at Generations United, we have hundreds of different examples. We have our programs of distinction is really 33 programs that meet these high quality standards for intergenerational work. We have an online intergenerational program database that has over 800 different intergenerational programs listed, as well as all of our toolkits and resource guides include intergenerational program profiles. The next slide. These are just some of our resources. Again, they're all available for free at our website. They all have examples of intergenerational work in them, and I'll post some of those links in the chat. The next slide. So there are some common elements among quality intergenerational programs that I wanted to share. First, they're relational, that they focus on building relationships between the generations, and then the activities are simply a vehicle to do so. They're reciprocal. The program design encourages encourages participants of all ages to give, to receive, to teach, and to learn. They empower the participants that the strengths of each generation are recognized and incorporated into activities, and the participants are involved in planning and implementation as much as possible. They're responsive, that they reflect the interests of the different age groups and respond to needs of the community. And finally, they're inclusive, and that they support the participation of people of all ages, backgrounds, abilities. The next slide. I wanted to take a couple of minutes just to share some current trends that we've been following and hearing about in intergenerational work. The next slide. Like everything else, the pandemic has really dramatically impacted opportunities for intergenerational engagement. We've seen greater recognition that social isolation and loneliness impacts all ages, and that bringing the generations together can increase social connectedness and enhance well-being. New pathways were created for engagement, while others were temporarily, and in some cases permanently, blocked. We're heartbroken to learn of the intergenerational programs that ended because of the impact of pandemic, but we've seen a number of remote programs and activities emerge to fill some of those gaps. And finally, we are starting to see some in-person interactions start up again. We just hear every day about different programs that are finally able to bring the generations back together. We know these interactions are valuable, and we've heard many stories over the past 2 years of older adults and children who miss spending time together. One program shared that their preschoolers kept asking if their grandfriends were upset with them, and they stopped coming to visit. And then another program reported that their staff really missed the intergenerational activities as much, if not more, than the older adults and the children. The next slide. So while remote programs have increased access to and participation in intergenerational relationships, for some people, we know that technology continues to be a challenge for many, whether it's connecting to the internet, having the appropriate device, knowing how to use it, or for people like my grandfather, even wanting to use it if they have it. These types of programs also present a number of challenges for some groups of participants, such as older adults in long-term care settings, babies, toddlers, and young children. One program that was trying to maintain an intergenerational reading program remotely found that they had to scale back the number and length of sessions, since the children did not have the same attention span over Zoom that they did when they're sitting next to their older friends in person. But it's not impossible. A music program at a nursing home here in Colorado was able to successfully transition to a remote program by engaging music therapy interns at the nursing home, and then parents and caregivers at home of toddlers to facilitate those interactions. The next slide. So sort of keeping on the technology theme here, it's not surprising to anyone that one of the trends is the use of technology and building digital competencies. There are a number of programs connecting the generations through learning and teaching tech skills. The Teen Years program, seen on this picture in Albuquerque, New Mexico, connects teen tutors with older adults. And then a digital connecting core pairs occupational therapy students at Eastern Michigan University with older adults at the Ypsilanti Senior Center for one-on-one tech support. Next slide. Colleges and universities have always been great partners for intergenerational programs, but we're seeing a real uptick in the number of programs out there. Time Out at UCLA is a student-run respite program, which offers free of charge to older adults who need companionship and enjoy socialization while providing respite for family caregivers. It was done in person. It's been remote over the past couple of years, but hopes to be in person again soon. The Pennsylvania Department of Aging has launched their Intergenerational University Connections program, which offers students real-world experience by completing service learning projects with older adults. I hope there's some folks from Pennsylvania that are here today, but really it's a phenomenal program that's now at 5 universities across the state, with at least one more preparing to come on board. Next slide. We've seen an increase in the use of outdoor spaces to bring older and younger people together. Programs have moved their in-person activities outside so that they were able to gather safely. Others have created community gardens. We have the Indaba Community Bandshell at St. Anne Center, which is an outdoor concert and performance space for intergenerational gatherings, campouts, walking clubs, field days, other types of games to facilitate connection. The next slide. So while intergenerational programs have always been committed to age diversity and inclusion, we've fallen short on acknowledging and highlighting intergenerational programs that are culturally, racially, and ethnically diverse. We've launched a new diverse intergenerational program initiative guided by an advisory group to review and evaluate existing definitions and resources in order to truly reflect, include, and celebrate diverse programs and encourage their development. This work is also highlighting practices that reflect cultural humility and responsiveness and elevate diverse leaders in the field. We're currently conducting a survey, we can go on the next slide real quick, to identify and learn more about programs and activities. So if you'd like to take it, you can put your camera up to the screen and take that QR code, or we will, I'll put the link in chat. We did just release our first program profile as part of this initiative, which is on the Koreatown Intergenerational Storytelling Program. And I'll also share that link in chat. And we will be releasing 2 more profiles this summer. We'll hope you'll check them out. The next slide. We're also just seeing more people interested in creating new intergenerational spaces, which we often refer to as shared sites. These are intentionally designed places, provide services and on programs to multiple generations at the same time. Some examples might be a community center with a senior center, a youth center, and a Head Start program, a joint child care, adult day program, or a long-term care community and a preschool. Switch to the next slide. Just a couple of tips that I wanted to close out sharing today on when we sort of give folks interested in getting started. The first is to learn from others, to find the programs that are out there, see what's been done or is being done, and assess what might work with your participants in your community. Start small. Think about projects or services that you currently offer that could have an intergenerational element, or start with a small pilot project to test something out. Look local, connect with members of your staff, clients, and families to see if they have connections. Does someone have a child in a nearby school, a friend who is a teacher, connections to Scout, a 4-H club, or other youth groups? And assess your neighborhood. What or who is nearby? If transportation is not an issue, that's one of the most significant barriers for getting the generations together. Once you find some possible partners, look for the intergenerational intersection of your work. What are the overlapping goals and objectives? Are you both looking to increase physical activity or expanding the use of technology? And then one consistent that I have seen in is that intergenerational practitioners are some of the most creative and persistent people that I know. Don't hesitate to try something out, change it if it's not working, and then finally make sure that what you're doing is fun, that the generations are coming together, that there's opportunities to laugh and celebrate together. And the last slide, that's my contact information. So I welcome anyone to just give me an email or check out our website if you're interested in learning more. And then we're really fortunate today to have representatives from 3 really different intergenerational programs. So I am really pleased to turn it over to Lena and Cindy to share their intergenerational work.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lena Mitchell, the grant writer at Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens. Cindy Smith is joining us. She is our occupational therapy assistant as well as our activities director. And we're both delighted to have this opportunity to showcase our Art at Your Own Pace program with a focus on our intergenerational activities. Next slide. Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens is one of 25 area agencies on aging in Virginia. We are located in Tazewell County in rural Southwest Virginia and have served the 4-county area of Buchanan, Dickinson, Russell, and Tazewell since 1975. Next slide. Art at Your Own Pace began in the spring of 2018 with a $5,000 grant from the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. This program holds an extra special meaning to me because it was the first grant I wrote for Appalachian Agency. It was originally designed to target our participants in the PACE program living with dementia because it's been shown that art fosters health and communication, and it also promotes the integration of physical, emotional, cognitive, and social functioning. Occupational therapy is an ideal setting since painting and crafting use techniques that engage clients while exercising cognitive, visual, and sensory skills. Art has been shown to elevate mood, increase social and sensory skills. Art has been shown to sorry about that. Art at Your Own Pace has since evolved into an intergenerational program to include individuals from both our adult day center and our children from our child daycare facility, because we know that activities which foster interaction between children and seniors link not only the two programs, but the two generations. Next slide. With this grant funding, we were able to purchase quite a bit of necessary arts and crafts supplies, along with furnishings for the art room and aprons for our clients. Long-range needs were also considered, so a sewing machine, an embroidery machine, and Cricut were also purchased. Next slide. And a dedicated art room was created for our participants. Next slide. This is something we're especially proud of, the governor's Christmas tree ornament. It is stitched with love and backed with tradition because quilts have been handed down through the generations by skilled hands. This Christmas quilt ornament commemorates this dying art form. Generations Intergenerational Day Center, adults and children, crafted this ornament to remind us that family and friends are the stitches that bind the fabric of our lives together from generation to generation. Next slide. This is some of the projects that the adults and children helped with. This is our 2019 Christmas parade floats, and the children and adults helped craft the individual pieces of this. Next slide, please. This is another Christmas parade float, and we've had one for many years, and the floats have won several first and second place awards as well as cash prizes. And now I'm going to turn things over to Cindy to talk a little bit more about specific projects and activities.
Thank you, Lena. Next slide, please. This is our live mural. This was our sidewalk chalk painting, and we kind of graded it so that our seniors were able to interact more with our children. We taped the chalk to the dowel rods, and they were able to facilitate this activity from the wheelchairs or walkers, as you can see, and the children love this very much. Next slide. Our children and adults also, this is another project. What we do is we do our projects in steps, especially through COVID. We have the child daycare that is adjacent to our building where our adult daycare center is. So we take projects, we'll start maybe with the adults and they'll do a step, and then we'll take it over to child daycare, and we go back and forth. So there's other ways of interactions besides being physically close to one another. So we try to get them involved and be creative with that. And we have saw so much outcome from this on both sides with the children and the adults. Next slide, please. These are some other things that we did. Some of the children created the feathers on the turkey, and some of the adults did. And they also completed this interaction. Next slide. This is our gardens program, and this is wonderful. We actually make like salad kits, and the participants will sow the seeds, they'll grow it, they take care of the garden, they maintain, the children come over, maintain this garden with them as well. So they see the fruits of their labor. We're able to send salad kits home, vegetables home. We have cooking groups here at ADC, and it's just really a wonderful interaction with our children. Next slide, please. Our Gardens reward is there. This reward is amazing for both our children and our adults. The interaction, it promotes healthy eating. Children will try vegetables they wouldn't normally try. They just love it, the interaction with our seniors. Next slide, please. And this is a video of our adults and our children. We still have to kind of keep them a little bit separate, you know, with restrictions and things, but they're still able to interact, and they talk to one another across the garden area, and it's amazing. Next slide, please. So one thing that we did through COVID-19 was we would again take these art projects into the homes from the child daycare back and forth, and keep those keep our seniors and our children together. Next slide. This was another art project. The adults painted the backgrounds on these, and then our children painted the pumpkins, and we did this in 4 different stages. Next slide. This is another program that we've created through Art at Your Own Pace. This is something we're very proud of. This is our Flying Free program. What we do with this is we paint birdhouses, and to wherever that our participants and our children would like to travel or go. And as we know, as seniors, a lot of them don't get to travel. So we contact the Chamber of Commerce's in those cities or towns, and they paint, decorate, fix the birdhouses, and we send those to wherever their dream travel would be. This is a wonderful interactive program. Our goal is to have birdhouses all across the United States. And we've already started this program, and we're very excited about it. And the children and adults have responded amazing with this. Next slide.
Thank you, Sandy. We really far surpassed our original expectations with this project. And as we've already mentioned, there's a permanent art room. Our clients have shown improvements with activities of daily living, their fine and gross motor skills, and their cognitive skills. The program has also helped curb their depression, and most of their participants enjoy the fun activities, and especially the ones with the children. And before, a lot of the participants did not want to interact and join in the activities, but they do now with the art projects. Next slide. And another outcome was this beautiful marketing folder that features the artwork of one of our participants, who was the winner of a sunflower painting contest. It was actually part of a paint and sip activity that Cindy thought up, and agency staff voted on the different paintings, and this was the winner. So now it graces our marketing folder. Next slide. And as far as sustainability goes, we have a few plans and ideas in the works. We would love to start an enterprise program of selling the participants' artwork with an online art gallery. And of course, we will continue to seek out community partners and donations from individuals. Next slide, please. And as far as replication goes, if you're interested in starting a program similar to Art at Your Own Pace, I do recommend that you find your own Cindy, because believe me, she has breathed life into this program and continues to do so. She inspires the participants, and her creativity knows no end. So you definitely need a Cindy to undertake this program. We did not really incur any costs beyond the grant because Cindy was already on staff. And having this defined art room, it was, and especially stocked with supplies, it just provided a lot more opportunities to build on what had already been started. Next slide. So we hope you enjoyed our presentation and learned a little bit about Art at Your Own Pace. Here is our contact information in case you might have any questions later on. And we certainly appreciate US Aging for providing this opportunity to showcase our program and our children and our seniors. So thank you so much. And I will turn things over to our next speaker, Shai.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here today. So we're talking about strategies for engaging folks in intergenerational spaces. I'll just mark that speaking to 130 people without knowing who they are or seeing them is kind of the opposite of engagement in terms of our strategies. So I'll try to do a bit more if I can. My name is Shai. I am the lead educator at DOROT, and all of our programs that involve folks under 18 meeting folks over 65 are in my domain. I'm gonna pop my information here in the chat because a lot of the programs I'm gonna be talking about today are also opportunities for y'all, if you're potential volunteers, to come and engage with us virtually or in person, but also opportunities for us to adapt our programs and work together with you and partner with you to create programming, something we're already doing in a few different sites, and like to be generous with our models, our lessons, our recruitment strategies, and all these different things. So if I can get a sense of who's with us, if you can type into the chat and enter in a word or two, kind of where are you coming at this from? Are you a teacher, a social worker, a potential volunteer, a teenager, an adult, an older adult? Kind of what is your interest today? And I'll try to pick up these things as they pop up. And I also invite you to type questions directly into the chat as we go, and I'll try to kind of connect the things that I'm saying to where your interests lie. All right, seeing a lot. Executive directors, so a lot of professionals, it looks like, from what's coming up. Coordinators, nonprofits, perfect. Librarians, awesome, thank you. Next slide. Great. So this is kind of a general overview of the things happening in my department, intergenerational program engagement. I'm not going to speak today about the ways we engage with families and younger children, but more focus on the teenagers, because I think we offer something unique in that sense. We have our service learning programs here on the bottom right, which are more kind of one-time opportunities and partnerships that we have with schools. This might look like a game day in a classroom, a virtual discussion about personal identity or bias, or a lot of different things. Our school clubs, which are partnerships with schools in which teens are paired with an older adult, either virtually via phone or even home visits, and they connect throughout the year, usually on a bi-weekly basis. So if there's 20 or 30 or 50 kids in a grade, we will split them up into pairs or threes, give them an orientation, and match them with an adult that they will visit in those small groups on a regular basis, either virtually or in person. Obviously, in the last couple of years, that has mostly been run through Zoom, but we've had a lot of successful clubs that have been running for many years, simply for those home visits. The teens will go on their own and report to us. We're keeping track, we're helping and supporting them in the background, but they really create these relationships that continue to grow. I was just recently speaking to one of our older adult volunteers, and she was telling me how one of our teens just came back from college. She's in her 4th year. They met for the first time about 6 years ago, and called her to meet up for a cup of coffee and talk about what her next steps might be. So that has been really great. We are a Jewish organization, but a lot of our programs are not inherently Jewish. The B'nai Mitzvah program, of course, is, and that is more of a middle school opportunity for kids to do projects. And coming up this year, we have a kind of service learning opportunity every month on a Sunday. We've kind of discovered that a lot of families are really looking for an opportunity that they can engage kind of as much or as little. So knowing that they can do a Sunday a month 10 or 11 or 12 months of the year, but they can also come twice or 3 times if that works for them, has been great. And it is a chance to engage our older adults as experts and bring them in to teach and create and be part of those circles. I really want to focus on those 3 things at the top: our teen internships, our summer teen internship, which is coming up, our academic year internship, and the Next Generation Teen Council, which is really made up of alumni from those 2 programs. So I'm going to ask to kind of pause the slides for a moment and tell you a bit about that. So our teen internships, which include a chess program, which has been featured on, or still is, a program of distinction here with Generations United, are really a way to bring teens and seniors into a mutual space. In a way, everyone's a volunteer. And there is a lot of learning and reflection that is incorporated into everything we do. While the move to Zoom was painful in some ways, as I'm sure it was for everybody, it's also expanded our reach quite a lot. And essentially during the year, teens and adults commit to an afternoon a week, and they can kind of pick their poison, right? So they can choose to sign up for an art class, a discussion group, a theater troupe, or a lot of other things that you can imagine, a history class, a sharing of stories, and we have a lot of different models for that kind of engagement. In the summer, we have our teens with us for 4 weeks at a time. And this is a program that we're implementing in other sites. So if you are a community center or a place that engages older people and younger people, but not necessarily in that meaningful way together, please reach out and we're happy to get a conversation started. This is a 4-week program. And really a way for the teens to acquire some leadership skills, really go deep and engage and create programs themselves, and for adults and teens to meet regularly in a mutual space. So one of the ways that we do that, for example, and I can ask for the slide to come back up and move to the next one, is really ask our participants how they want to engage and what feels good to them. And one way of doing that is relying a lot on stories and the sharing of stories. This is a way that I started a process not too long ago. There's always a version of it. If you were to tell a story about a time that you felt most comfortable or at ease or like yourself, you would tell a story about the time you blank. So if I have some brave people in the 127 here that are willing to take a moment and think of this and just type into the chat in a word or 2, right? You know what the full story is, but a word or 2 would be a story about the time you blah-de-de-blah. I'm going to give that a moment and see if some things pop up. And as you're thinking, I'll share why this is important. Both our teens and our adults make a commitment to attend 4, 5, 7, 8 sessions. And that's important. They build a group together and a community together. And by discussing these kinds of things, we're creating a space that's unique to each cohort of teens and adults, that's unique to how they want to engage and what is important to them. And that mutuality is huge. Let's jump a slide ahead. I know I'm running out of time. This is an example of our semester as it was in the spring, for example, and we run this throughout the year. There are usually 4 or 5 workshops running at the same time. And while chess used to be really our kind of capstone program, it is now still an amazing program, but just one program out of many. And as we come into this fall, our virtual programs will continue in this way on top of the in-person programs returning. So this is really a way for adults and for teens to kind of come as they are and choose what is important to them and where they want to connect. And it's really, really meaningful for folks who are avid musicians, who identify with a community like an LGBTQ+, or a Jewish group studying Midrash, right? To connect with an affinity group and really have that connection with elders, and for elders to have that connection with young people who are really wanting to make meaning together and create together, where the adult isn't the subject, right? Or the recipient, but that it really is a mutual space. With my last 30 seconds or so, I'm gonna jump ahead. So can I get another? And let's stay here. So talking about that mutuality, teens are creating the programming. There's a chance for adults to create programming. The cycle of praxis is something we talk about a lot in the summer. Everything the teens are learning with us is then implemented into the program that they're doing, then comes back to reflection, and then back into the program. So there's constantly this engagement on a deeper level. And we do ask both our adults and both our teams to be committed to a process, not to show up for one event, but to be part of an ongoing process in the same group and over long periods of time. And we do see that most of them do stay, not even just for one semester, but for years. I'm going to pause here because I think I'm at time, and invite you all to put any questions you might have for me in our Q&A. And I'm happy to call on Jody, who is, I believe, next. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Shai. Great to hear all these wonderful presentations, and just the variety of intergenerational programs has been amazing. So thank you so much to Engage for inviting me. I'm going to share with you even another slightly different version of an intergenerational program that we host here at the CU Anschutz Medical Campus. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little grounding of who we are the Multidisciplinary Center on Aging. We are the only academic medical campus in the state of Colorado. So we really become that central hub for all things aging. And we are stood up by 4 pillars that include education and training, clinical care, research, and outreach and engagement, all related to aging. That centralized resource is a huge resource to have here on campus for the variety with the different schools, which include the School of Pharmacy, School of Medicine, School of Dental Medicine, School of Public Health, and a College of Nursing. So just to give you kind of an idea of who we are and our role, certainly within our own campus, as well as within the state of Colorado. So next slide, please. So COASTED is the program that I'm going to share with you today, which stands for Connecting Older Adults and Students Through Interprofessional Telecare. And this program really came about as the pandemic was kicking off back in March of 2020. And we were seeing through our seniors clinic over at the hospital that all of a sudden, as we all know, clinics, doctors' offices were shutting down, and the heightened anxiety among our older adult patients was happening very quickly. Not only were they being told to isolate at home, but they were very worried when they might see their doctor and or clinician again. So we had that going on, while at the same time, we had a variety of medicines, pharmacy, dental medicine, and nursing students all wondering how they were going to be involved in their clinical rotations. Things were shutting down, and that was no different for the clinical rotations that were impacting our students greatly. So what we did is quickly put together an isolation program where we paired students and older adults through a phone program. And we identified about 300 of our patients initially that were red flagged to have heightened anxiety about the social isolation and certainly loneliness that was starting to happen. And we paired them with health profession students. We rolled out over 1,000 phone calls in the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, where students were really engaging with these older adult patients about any healthcare needs, any questions, any concerns that they were having. Keep in mind, these were our own patients. So HIPAA was not an issue because being our own patients and being paired with the clinicians in the clinic, we didn't have to worry about that. However, because that program was so well received amongst our own internal seniors clinic, we immediately were seeing the great impact that the pandemic was having in our long-term care and assisted living communities. So we rolled out the program to pair residents of those communities with additional students across campus. Next slide, please. And so we then were teaming up with about 45 long-term care and assisted living communities across the state of Colorado, where we were pairing the health profession student with the older adult in those particular communities. And then word got out even more that obviously adults still living independently in their homes were experiencing the loneliness and social isolation that the pandemic was bringing. So we expanded again out into the community where we paired community, older adults, and students to become phone partners. So we have paired about 300 older adults and students from the community that have been paired. The city of Centennial is a suburb of the Denver metro area, and they just put forward in front of their city council to have Coast-It become their social isolation program. So we will be within that community now, pairing residents of Centennial with CU Anschutz health profession students. Next slide, please. So the criteria for older adults to participate is pretty simple. We really look for older adults who might be experiencing that social isolation, that feeling of loneliness, who would like to participate in also mentoring a health profession student. This is a win-win not only for the older adult, but for our health profession students. By becoming paired partners, the students themselves are really honing their communication skills with older adults, because as we know, the majority of them will have a significant patient panel of older adults once they graduate and become practicing clinicians in their community. So it really gives them an opportunity to hone those skills, hone those bedside skills that are so desperately needed in the healthcare community. They sign a consent, the older adult does, to just say that they do agree to participating and have a CU Anschutz health profession student as a phone partner. And then we really leave it up to the pair to determine how often it is that they want to interact. Some of our pairs talk once a week, some of our pairs talk every other week. We do encourage, however, that the communication happens at minimum once every other week. But now with the pandemic loosening a little bit, we are finding that pairs are very interested in meeting now over a cup of coffee. So it's starting to expand a little bit more outside of just a regular phone call. Next slide, please. So why does this matter also for our students? We conduct a monthly in-service for the over 150 students that participate, where we specifically focus on a geriatric topic. So we're giving them tools for their tool chest. They may not necessarily go specifically into geriatrics, but as we all know, with the population of older adults growing, that they will have a significant patient population on their panel. So by introducing our students to older adults and actually being partners for a minimum of an academic year, they are seeing the aging process happening right before their eyes. Next slide, please. We also evaluate our students and assess our students. So we do a COCOA survey at the beginning of a semester and then at our academic year and at the end of the academic year. And really it's to assess what are their attitudes, feelings, and perceptions about aging. And as you can see from the bottom bullet there, that from when they are originally assessed at the beginning of a semester to when they do finish at the end of an academic year, that their perception is going way up about older adults, which we are thrilled to see happen. So next slide, please. So talking a little bit about stakeholder engagement, just want to share with you if you'd like to take this model and maybe use it within your community to pair up either with a medical campus or with a healthcare community and older adults. So next slide, please. I'll walk you through what each of these steps that we did, certainly that helped outline this. So what is the strategy? The strategy is that we want to pair older adults with health profession students who can help one another. The connection built with the student helps really in the loneliness and social isolation that the older adult may be experiencing. And on the flip side, the older adult is becoming really a mentor for that student to, like I said, hone their communication skills for their future clinical practices. Next slide, please. So we can't do this without partners. And certainly as the Division of Geriatrics, we're a small division within the Department of Medicine that lives in the School of Medicine. However, the response across campus was overwhelming with our various schools and the college. In addition to UC Health, which is University Hospital, and then obviously we couldn't expand outside of the campus borders if we didn't have partners within the long-term care and assisted living communities, as well as our key stakeholders in our network with community organizations across the state. Next slide, please. So what was that engagement process? Here we had this program that was small and mighty, but it was very focused within our own seniors clinic. How are we going to get this word out? So obviously, much like we all do on this call today, is we had to create promotional materials and describe what it is that we can offer their residents, or as a person experiencing isolation, what does that mean by pairing up with a student? So we needed to be able to deliver that in a variety of deliverable formats. We needed schedules because, as you saw from the earlier bullets, we started with our seniors clinic, we went to long-term care and assisted living communities, and then we really went to the entire community. So how are we going to do that and scale up over about 6 months was the time frame. And then obviously making sure that we get the consent forms back and any other action items that were needed. Next slide, please. So that connection was huge, especially with our key stakeholder partners across campus, as well as our key stakeholder partners off campus, as they were the voice of this program within their respective areas. So we wanted to make sure that we were checking in. Is this working? Is this not working? How are the phone calls going? Are they connecting? The students had to actually record their phone calls and how often they were having the calls with their respective program coordinators in their programs. The community folks through the Center on Aging, we were checking in with our key stakeholders. And if there were any hiccups with regards to maybe lack of technology to receive consent forms, then we could immediately pivot and make sure that those people got their information maybe by regular mail. So checking in with our key stakeholders consistently was key. Next slide, please. And so talking a little bit about the evaluation. I talked to you earlier in a slide about attitudes, beliefs about aging in general. This is another question that we asked that we're really thrilled to see that choosing a career in geriatrics would be a good decision. And due to their pairing and their experience in being and spending so much time with an older adult, that we actually had a big leap of clinical students who now would consider going into geriatrics as their specialty within their segment of healthcare. So, which is great because we are in desperate need as a nation on geriatric trained clinicians. So we're really thrilled to see that is having such a positive effect. Next slide, please. And finally, since this is sharing best practices with all of you, and again, I hope this becomes a framework that you're interested in starting within your communities to help healthcare professions, students engage with older adults. But certainly that balance of students and older adults is always fluctuating. And I think that's probably across the board with all of us in our different intergenerational programs. There is a balance of people who may have to drop, or new students who are coming in. The longitudinal program is key. We had at the very beginning students who were participating only for a semester because that's what their program allowed. And yet we found that the students really don't see the entire aging process happening in front of their eyes in only a 16-week semester. So now all of the programs are engaging in at least a minimum of an academic year. We have a number of partners who have been now partners for over 2 years. So they definitely stay engaged. And then having a central hub is key, whether it's just you as the coordinator of the program and or a central hub of a team who can answer any questions, get out information into the community or across campus. That is key. And then funding, as we all struggle, I'm sure with. However, I'm really happy that to announce that we just received a very significant grant for this program yesterday. So, so there is always light at the end of the tunnel. So next slide. So thank you very, very much. That was really quick, and I am happy to answer any questions because I think we're moving, Meredith, into that section next.
Yes, we will. I'm actually not sure we'll have time, but I know folks will be happy to answer questions, offline, and we'll make sure to share this PowerPoint slide deck on our website. I already placed a link to that in the chat earlier. So if you do want to follow up with any speakers with any specific questions, you can definitely do that away or connect with us as the Engaged staff, and we'll be sure to connect you. Just a couple quick resources. Through Engaged, we have a new publication called What Works, Social Engagement Innovations and Best Practices that you may wish to check out. We also have a variety of other resources on our website. And Ali, you can go to the next slide, which lists our contact information for both Engaged, but also another, in the chat, I will place a link to that website, as well as a link to Commit to Connect. And you can go to the next slide again. Commit to Connect is another initiative that we're involved with here at US Aging. We actually serve as the coordinating center. And I just wanted to flag it real quick today. It's initiative launched as a result of COVID, and it's focused on fostering a nationwide network of champions, folks like you all on the line today, both panelists and attendees, who are committed to addressing social isolation and loneliness. And it's no cost to you to sign up to become a champion. It's really open to all of us in this line of work. And so I just encourage you to check out the committoconnect.org website to learn more. And you go to the next slide. But in particular for this webinar today, I wanted to draw your attention because through Commit to Connect, we're launching what's called a community of practice. And so it's a forum for people who are interested in connecting with others who care about intergenerational work and social engagement and that intersection really. So if you're interested in considering joining the community of practice, it'll be monthly sessions over 4 months where a small group of 25 to 35 people or so will convene and meet up to share and learn from each other. And there is an application process, and you can find more information on that website, but it was just so pertinent to the topic today. I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to get that plug in. Like I say, I don't want to run over today because I do want to be sensitive to your all's time, both panelists and attendees. So Ali, you can skip 2 slides ahead to the final one, which is just thank you. Thank you to all of you for participating. We will be doing a survey after this webinar closes. So basically, as soon as your Zoom browser closes or your Zoom application closes, a survey will pop up. It's a very brief survey, just has a couple questions basically, and it'll probably take maybe 2 minutes of your time, if that. I encourage you all to do that. And we also do a 3-month check-in survey. I know it seems a little ways out, so sometimes people are wondering why they get it in 3 months, but that's because we're looking to track longer-term impacts of these types of convenings. And again, the recording and the copy of the slide deck will be available on our website, engagingolderadults.org. And we, again, want to thank you all for spending a little bit of your time with us today. I wish you all a great day. Thank you.